spit, just, and he stopped the platoon, come back through. Who done that? And I thought, I'm not going to tell you because I know I'd be in deep trouble. But I think he might have suspected. So a little later, we had another drill, marching drill, and then he got us out in the
This is
sand.
Janice Parker,
And
and I was supposed to have a delivery this morning.
everybody got a little bit of stuff on their gun, couldn't help it. And he just picked up 4 or 5 of us that I think he suspected something. And he made us do this, and we had to do that with a rifle until one of the kids passed out, and he actually was next to me. I down there stopped and tried to catch him, but he went.
It's not gonna happen.
That's the only way he would have gone until one of us conked out.
Okay.
So did you? What? That was because you spit?
Well,
Okay. But they were-
like I said, when you're in,
Okay.
and that's one thing the Marines did do. They were excellent marchers, and everything had to be really precise. And maybe if I'd have turned my head and made noise, he could have picked up on it.
And you? So then he picked out the 4 of you.
I think he just, he probably thought, well, I'll make an example here, and he may have got the wrong people altogether, but the rest of the platoon then knew what the hell they had to do.
So this was at. Where was this at?
Oh, this is in boot camp.
Was boot camp? It was at Camp Pendleton.
No, it's in San Diego.
Where's Camp Pendleton? What? Weren't you there at all?
No, I never was. That's about 40 miles up the coast from San Diego.
Oh, okay.
I went when I went through boot camp, and they put me in the Air Corps, Marine Air Corps, and then that's when I went to school and learned about the turrets. And actually, when I went to school, I was a Navy school. There was 5 Marines, and the rest of the class were sailors. And when we finished, all of those sailors got what would have been equivalent probably to a corporal. And when us 5 come out, I was the only one that even got PFC. And couldn't budge off those ranks. And the job I had on the carrier, on the planes, electric and turret gun mechanic, was supposed to be a tech sergeant. Shit, I was a PFC.
Which? I can't hear you very good. Which planes did you say you worked on, Dad?
What planes? Oh, you heard of the Corsairs,
Yeah.
the Gold Wings?
Yeah.
I didn't work on them, but that was our fighter. They were just a single engine outfit. And then we had 12 TBM, torpedo bombers. And right back of the pilot is where they had the gun turrets. And that was the most essential part of that because they couldn't come in behind on them. That gunner was catching them coming right in. And that's the ones that I was in charge of. But believe it or not, when I went to school, it was all about electric turrets. But it didn't take me too long to figure out.
So what were those? Were those hydraulic turrets, or how were they operated? The ones you worked on.
Oh, they're hydraulic, yeah. Or the electric turrets would, of course, were electric. I don't know what planes they would have been on, but when I went to Florida, went through school, and then they shipped me right back to San Diego.
Oh, I didn't know you went to Florida. Maybe you've told me before. But
Oh, yeah.
how long were you there?
through that school. I don't know what it was, 8 weeks or something like that. They had a tornado while we was there. We were locked up for about 3 days, and that rain was so severe that you could get it through the little, where the windows come down, it'd drive that rain right through those cracks.
Oh, wow. So that torpedo bomber, you were talking about the turret, was that under the plane or on top?
No, right back to the pilot. They was no doubt coordinated when you come to the tail. If that was in the way, it would never fire there. But, you know, I had to make sure everything was working on them. And I was supposed to get flight pay. And I asked about it, even though, I went to the tech sergeant and I said, well, I'm supposed to, you know, go up once in a while and get some flight pay. And he says, buddy, there is 6 MT sergeants, the top ones. He said, do you think you're ever going to get flight pay or even get off the ground?
So were they prejudiced because you were Marine and they were Navy?
Oh, no, they were Marines too.
Oh.
Real old heads that.
So did you ever become a corporal?
Yeah, I finally got to be a corporal. That was it. I don't know even when that took place.
How long were you in for?
I think I was only in for 28 months or something like that.
And how long were you on the aircraft carrier?
I think we was out there for 5 months.
Out on the ocean without going into port at all, or did you go into port occasionally?
No, I don't think, because there was day after day after day that we never seen land at all. And then we got in one pretty good storm out there one time, and but really, I never had that much to do as far as the shoot 'em up part of any of it.
So,
And actually, in that time, when we was at Miramar, might have been before I went to school. They had a basketball for the whole base. They had about 5 teams for the whole base. And I went over one night and asked the coach any chance to get to play, and he said, well, he said, we had a cancellation from an Army team, but he said, if you want to come over, I'll run you through a few things here and see if I can keep you in. So went through that practice, and he said, come back. He said, I want you back here at a certain time for practice. So when we mustered in the morning, I told the sergeant there I was supposed to be over to the gym at a certain time. He said, bullshit. So when I finally did get to see Lieutenant Sims, he says, where was you? I told you to be here at practice. And I said, well, I was told I couldn't come. And then he got the sergeant just ripped his. Anyway, I just played on that little team for a while. And then on the team that represented the whole Air Corps, they had 5 guys on there that were permanent. And believe it or not, there was 2 PFCs and 3 corporals on the main 5, but they stayed right there on that base all the time. And then the second 5, they'd pick up guys coming through, and Sims said, they got an opening over there, I want you to go over. And so I was the second string there on the main team for a while. Didn't get to play hardly any, but.
And that was when you were.
That was at Miramar. They represented the Marine Air Corps, this team.
How long were you there for?
Well, and I went I was, on the team for quite a while, and quite a while. At least a month or two anyway during the season. And then this electric school come up. So I signed up for that as an electrician, and the coach said, well, he says, unless you can come in there full time. So I stayed with the school because I knew there wouldn't be anything much to that. But
So
it was
those
a good
guys that were
experience.
first string, that was pretty much their job in the Marine
I
Corps,
think they
playing
stayed there. I
basketball.
think they stayed there at the duration.
Huh.
And they weren't what I would call, they were big at the time, but nothing like these guys now.
Were they like my size or taller than me?
Oh,
or-
well, they were bigger, yeah. I'd say, they went up to maybe 6'3" or 4", something like that, maybe a 5. But now, shit, they're well over, well, not a lot, but some over
Yeah.
7.
Yeah.
In fact, there's one player there I think is 7'6".
Oh man. Yeah.
But all of that was good experience.
So when you guys were out on the ocean, I mean, it was after the war. You went out after the war, right?
They
But-
u-
I thought I remember you telling me that you saw a plane crash or heard
oh
about.
well, that even when we was at El Toro on the base, what happened with this Corsair, the gold wings ones,
Uh,
were really a high torque, hot. If they opened that throttle wide open, they could turn it. And we was training there at El Toro, and the planes was coming in there all the time. And this one pilot come in, and I guess the last second he put the throttle to it and just flipped it over, and boom, the flames went up. It just, the torque on that thing.
really, it just
Was that-
flips it right over.
Well, at that time, those Corsairs were one of the hottest planes around.
Huh. I'm assuming that killed him.
Oh yeah.
Did you see? Were there any planes that crashed when you were out at sea?
Oh yeah. Well, not to where anybody got killed, but I seen several crash. In fact, I could see I was kind of all by myself. I didn't have to really check in with everybody every day, and so I was interested in what went on the landings and all that, and should have been on the hangar deck. Well, when the planes come in, I thought, shit, I went up there and there was the catwalk down below the flight deck wasn't down very far, so you could see everything. I'd go up there and watch them come in and catch the hook and all that. One of them caught the hook one day and come right toward I dove down in there.
Oh, really?
And we had a couple catch the hook and then hang over, and they'd have to get, I know one or two like that. They got the pilot out and then they just have to dump the plane.
So they were coming in too hot, or there was a malfunction
Well,
on the hook? Or?
And it really, they were, with those Corsairs, now this is the Corsair, not the TBMs, like the one I worked on, were a lot slower and they could come in a lot smoother. But like some of the second lieutenants or whatnot that was just starting, it was damn near a crash landing when they hit that, where the colonel, the old colonel that was in charge of the air wing, geez, he'd come in just smooth. He was one hell of a pilot.
Is that why you like watching the Black Sheep Squadron so
Yep.
much?
Because that plane is like we had 12 of them on there. and I'd watch them take off and land all the time. And actually, that Black Sheep Squadron wasn't bullshit. They were a rowdy bunch, but they were good pilots, evidently.
Now, were they based in the South Pacific somewhere?
Yeah, they were on a different base. I don't know that much about the geography over there. They mentioned the name of the base and whatnot they were on most of the time. But and of course they show several dog fights with, and a lot of that film, I guess, is probably fairly authentic. The film itself, the story is bullshit, all right.
Oh, I remember you telling me that you had no desire to go back on the ocean after that. I guess.
I don't really care about it, really.
Was it just because
Well,
you were out there so long, or
Well,
what?
I don't know, but I did go when Janice and I took the trip up the coast, and that year that we spent out in the motorhome. When we got up to Eureka, above Frisco there, I went out salmon fishing, and it was a rough day that day, but I took Dramamine, so I was okay. But I seen a couple of those poor guys. The minute we got on the boat and started out, they got sick, and they just laid in there and threw up all the time. We was out.
Well, so have you, did you ever go on an Alaskan cruise or anything like that? Just didn't have any interest in going out on a ship after that, huh?
Well, we rode where was it, the ferry, when we went up to see Sean once. But it was just, bells not ringing what port or what not it was, but it was over and back, and it was just. But at when we went to, your mother and I went to Alaska, we had that little car, and to go from Valdez up to where you have to go through the tunnel, we had to put the car on and went up to this place, and then they'd put you on the train and you go through the tunnel, and then we drove on around through Anchorage and then back into Valdez.
Hmm.
And then when Janice and I went, we just had that pickup with a shell on it, and I fixed a bed in the back and a bunch of those blue boxes with different things in it went up underneath. That was a good trip, though.
I'd like to go up there. I heard you and Tom talk about it. It sounds really neat. Except I don't know if I'd want to have the experience that Tom had up there. But,
Yeah, he was probably as close as he's ever going to get.
yeah.
I think Tom's been up there every year for at least, well, before I ever come down. That's the last time I went, and that was the first trip he went out. And after that, I think him and Smitty went. I thought it was almost every year. And then when Smitty didn't go, there were some guys from Twilla went up there a few times. And I don't know whether he missed it year. He might have done it.
Hmm. So do you have any stories about your siblings or your parents that you can remember that you don't know that you've told any of us? I mean, you said that you really didn't know much about what your dad did in the Depression and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what he done there at Tinnick.
Oh, okay. What?
What happened at Tinnick was they Dad's job was he called him a stationary engineer. In other words, he had the same type of boiler and stuff in there like they had in the engines. But what that was all for was to heat the crude oil, because they had to keep the crude oil warm enough so when the trains pulled in, that they could pump it up in the container on the trains.
Oh, otherwise it was too thick. Oh.
Then that was the one part of his job. The other was to soften the water. So he had to, there was a tank about as big around as this room and about that high. And he'd have to, it had a big, what's called in the term, and he'd have to put so many sacks of soda ash and lime and mix it all up and get it in the right solution. Then it had to be pumped up into this softener that was right next to it. And then it went down through Excelsior filters and whatnot. And then all the water that went over to the whole town was out of there. It was really soft.
Really?
In fact, a lot of people didn't like the taste of it at all. We didn't know it, but notice it. But just a touch of soap would give you all you needed. But anyway, then he'd have to go over, and most all of the trains stopped for inspection there, all the freight trains, and he'd have to go over and put the water in. You know, get up on the engine, pull the thing down, and water them. So he was fairly busy all day.
So why was it important to have soft water? I don't get that.
Because of the boilers. They would corrode real quick if that water wasn't soft.
Huh. Well, what kind of piping were they using back then? Was it copper or were
No. Old iron.
Huh.
The well there at Tinnick was 600 foot deep. And really, that was the only water around there. And of course, that was an electric pump over there. But they'd pump the water out of there, and then they'd come over, and Dad would have to run all this stuff through the softening system and up through the what's it called up there?
The filter?
Yeah. And the only reason we got to even go to Tinnick was the guy that was out there had more seniority than Dad, but he couldn't climb that stairs up to that softener. And it was just a circle stair around. It wasn't way up there, but he couldn't climb. So Dad got the job where we'd have had to go to Kelso.
So now, was your mom originally from the Lehigh area as well, or American Fork, or where did they meet?
Yeah, she was from Lehigh. In fact, mother, Cliff was the oldest. There was Cliff, and then Mother, and then Ike. And they might have been the only three that were, no, there had to be at least one more. Who was next in line? Anyway, there was only about 4 of them born, and I think they were all Lehigh. And then Grandpa went to Canada, so several of them were born up there. And they would have stayed there, surely, but Grandpa's mother got sick, and he come back down to Lehigh to help her out, and they eventually moved down.
So were they, I remember seeing something about Cardston. Is that where they were at, was Cardston?
That doesn't quite sound right, but and it could have been. Anyway.
It was Alberta, right?
Yeah. We actually went through there coming back, Janice and I, and went out to the graveyard.
So do you have some relatives that are buried there, the Foxes?
Not that I know of, because after they moved to Lehigh, I think they were all buried down that country.
Oh, okay. So you don't know how many years they were up there then?
I don't, but it must have been quite a few because I think at least 5 of them were born up there. Now, let's see, but now wait a minute, maybe I'm wrong there. There could have been, because Mick and Morris and Lynn and Lige, I think were all born in Lehigh. So there might have been Aunt Kate and maybe 2 more of them is all that were born up there.
The younger ones.
The younger ones, they got back down to Lehigh and then.
So did Grandma and Grandpa, your mom and dad, did they meet just in school in Lehigh, or do you know where they met?
Well, Dad was from American Fork and Mother was from Lehigh.
Oh.
And I probably heard how they first met. I don't know how it was.
So, I know you guys were in Lehigh for a while. Then you said that he got transferred out to Tinnick. And you were basically there until you went into the service, right?
Yeah.
And then when you got out, did you immediately start working for the railroad when you got out? Or?
Well, before I ever went in, I got the job at Tinnick, the maintainer at Tinnick. So, according to GI Bill, you had the rights to that job when you come back. And a guy older than me had bid it in, but he had to leave. But I was only there about a few days, and I got bumped from Bud Stores. He had more seniority, and when he come back, why, he got bumped, and so he bumped me, and that's when I had to go to Rocks.
That sounds like a marvelous place.
Oh, I don't know. It was. I had a lot of fun there. Really, I was always really my own boss in a way, and when I first little bit of extra money I got, I went out and bought me a shotgun, and I would hunt quail. There was a lot of quail down there, even though there really wasn't any season, I guess. But I used to hunt a lot of quail, and it was always a good job. I always really enjoyed the job. That's the one thing.
So I should know this, but where was Rick born? Was he born in the Tinnick area, or where? I guess I should ask Rick.
See, I was thinking I was still in the service, so when he was born.
I remember seeing pictures of you holding him when he was a little baby in your uniform.
Oh, well, yeah, him and your mother were, when I was down in San Diego area, was there for, I think, until I went out on the carrier ride.
Oh, okay. And then,
Let me think, Gordon. He might have been born when I was back in Florida or someplace. I never really spent quite a while since I even thought about it.
so was Jerry born by the time you got sent to Rocks, or was that?
No, Rick was the only one when I was at Rocks.
And then where did you go after that?
Elgin. But I was trying to think, and I'm not sure about Jerry. He was, I think the first one that was born at, I know Lana, we had to go into Salt Lake, was at Elgin. We had to go into Salt Lake when she was born. And then when Tom, it was in the winter time, and so he we had him go up to Bud Stores, the assistant supervisor. He stayed up to Caliani, and he was born there in Caliani.
I remember hearing stories about there was problems when he was born breech or
I
something
think
like
he
that.
was, yeah.
Sounds like it would have been pretty rough back there with no real hospitals around and
Well,
stuff like
there was a hospital there.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, it's probably the same one. I don't know how big it is now, but I think it's probably the same one. But it was maybe 2 doctors.
Hmm. So did you have any, when you were working on the railroad, did you have any close calls? I remember earlier you were talking about that lightning hitting the rails and stuff like that.
Yeah,
You,
I
you had to jump off a motor car, didn't you?
got hit there at Fost, yeah. And several times I've had close calls. I have to high rail it.
When high rail is,
That means you stop wherever you're at and you jerk it up off the rail and over the fill. I had a couple of those.
isn't the motor car pretty heavy? I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, they're not light, but you'd be surprised how much power you got if you got a trailer.
So you were a maintainer when you were in those areas, right? You were maintaining the switches, or what? When you say maintainer, maintaining the track or the whole
The
deal?
whole signal system in that 20 mile or whatever you had. That was the signals, the bonds on the track, the switches, pole line, power, all of that was under the signal.
Hmm. How long did you do that before you became
Well,
a
see,
signalman?
Started down the rocks, and I was there for, I don't know, a while anyway. And then Elgin come up for bid, and I think we was there at Elgin maybe for 2 or 3 years. That was a position compared to rocks. There wasn't any comparison because we could get to town and whatnot once in a while.
So rocks was pretty much just out in the middle of nowhere.
There was, when I was there, you couldn't get out in a vehicle. The only way we got out was on the train.
Oh, really? There were no roads to it.
There wasn't then. There was an old road at one time, but nobody had a car or anything there.
Huh. So was it when it was